Hello, everyone. This is our 8th episode of Sketchy Talk. Today we are talking to Thomas O. Miller. What does the O stand for, Tom?
Owen.
Owen. Okay. I've seen the O for years and I never knew what it stood for.
Well, I
But,
mean, a very quick aside was when I had no middle name. My parents,
oh,
neither my brother nor myself, middle names. And in second grade, all my friends had them, and I asked my parents. They said, "Well, if you want a middle name, pick one." So I decided to go with Owen, which worked out well because our family is half the family's Welsh, so it's a good
oh,
Welsh name, and it makes my initial spell Tom. And when you're in second grade, that is the coolest thing ever. So.
that is cool.
Yeah.
But here's a short bio on Tom. Tom works with incubation facilities, upstream groups, and directly with corporations to bring concepts to life through sketches and illustrations. This is done in a cooperative environment, working directly with brand managers, scientists, engineers, and members of agencies of record for the products concepts being developed and discussed, sometimes current products or commercial innovation of an existing item. He enjoys working in this fast-paced and fluid environment, bringing concrete images to the concepts of people who are very creative yet hindered by an ability to express their vision on paper to share with others. He works with groups that range from 3 or 4 people to a room of 40 plus attendees. This can generate upwards of 60 drawings of methods of action, adcepts, metaphorical images, and more. His background in working in planetariums and P&G 40 plus brands also makes him unique in having a strong understanding of science and the ability to bring technical biological concepts to life in clear, understandable fashion for both industry participants and consumers as well. Merged with education and illustration based in traditional drawing methods, this allows him to create images quickly and nimbly on the fly without having to resort to digital media during the sessions. His digital side can be utilized to take these drawings and bring them out to the concept stage into fully realized images for presentation, publication, or animation purposes. Wow, that's a lot, Tom. That's really cool.
This guy sounds great.
I know. And we aren't even talking about your illustration career, where you have done a lot of artwork for Scientific American and other publications. You used to work with Ralph Partha, which did a lot of miniatures for role-playing games and that sort of thing. You've just done a lot of really interesting things. This discussion is mostly about your sketching practice, which is probably, what would you say, even 80% of your work life these days?
Yeah, I would say at least, yeah, if not even more than that, probably like 90% of what I do. Yeah,
And you don't really work in a sketchbook. You work on copier paper and just put them in giant binders. What
I
got you
do.
started working on sketch prompts? Because how many did you say you have? Over 600 of these sketches now?
Yeah, there is a woman out of England, and every day she has a site called Daily Sketching Workout that I just sort of stumbled upon one day. And every day she puts out a prompt. I mean, just as an example, she puts out three of them on Friday, so she doesn't have to look at it over the weekend. But Fridays is strength competition. Saturdays is a scorpion sting, and Sunday is a spotted cow. These are all open to, however you want to interpret them. So it's not only a good experience in drawing, but also, it gives you a chance just to let your mind wander. So much of the work that I do at Procter & Gamble is you do get into some metaphorical things, but generally it's fairly, show Pepto-Bismol doing this, or show how absorbent the new tampons are, but this is just sort of a fun time just to let my mind wander and go far afield in what I'm thinking in terms of an answer.
So, what made you decide to start doing these prompts? How long ago was this?
Actually, it's probably been about, I think probably about 4 years now that I've been doing these. Like I said, I just stumbled on it. It's a great way to start the day. I try to do them when I first get to the computer, well, in front of the computer, but I do them on, like you were saying, on copier paper. But just before I sit down and start getting into, the necessary things, just to sort of, fire up the brain, nimble up the fingers, and yeah, just it's a good fresh way to start the day. So.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. And before that, have you ever worked in sketchbooks, or has it mostly been you just doodle on whatever paper's around?
Yeah, just do it on paper. I've never really kept sketchbooks. I mean, I have some laying around, but I just never been quite that disciplined about stuff. I was either working on other things. The whole sketching in terms of like with Procter and Gamble didn't start until probably, I guess maybe, well, at this point, maybe about 18 years ago. We had been living in California for 4 years, and I had done some work prior to us going there in 2000 for Procter and Gamble, but not a great deal. When I came back, one of the people that I did a lot of work for had started his own business, and needed some people to be able to do drawings for them, and it really kind of opened up the whole sketching idea. I mean, before when I would do paintings, I would do sketches and then final, rough drawings and then final drawings, but only when it was kind of necessary as part of a step leading towards a final painting. So this
Mm-hmm.
really opened up that whole just sketching to be sketching type of situation, and really enjoyed it. Um, it just really makes you think fast and on the fly,
Mm-hmm.
and because you have people in these meetings that, I think like where you read that they have great ideas, but as engineers and scientists, a lot of times they have no way to bring it to fruition or bring it to life. So you're there to help them bring those things out so they can show it to other people going, yes, this is what my idea was.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're fortunate enough, you can even add, your own spin to it, or embellish what they were asking for. And, I mean, it's kind of a fun, not exactly an ego trip, but you just get a lot of satisfaction when you see these people's faces light up when all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden they've got this, blue sky concept, and then suddenly there it is where they can hold it on a piece of paper.
I mean, it seems like visualization is really something that a lot of people could use a boost with, because it used to be before cameras, people did a lot more sketches. And we talked before on the podcast about how now more and more in science curriculums, they're having people do um, sketching, not just like for field sketching and that sort of thing. Because, oh, did you need to
I
insert?
just said right. Sorry.
Oh, oh, okay. It was kind of muffled, so I wasn't. I'll cut that out. Um, but it seems like more and more in science curriculums and stuff, they are having people do sketching because it improves your observational skills. Like if you're in a field and you're looking at a flower, or if you're looking at a specimen of some sort, taking a photo often doesn't get all the detail that actually looking at it and drawing it does. Even if you draw it badly, it doesn't give it somehow imprints on the brain a little bit more than if you just take a photo of it, or just look at it. And that is something that is not communicated as strongly in education as reading and writing, which maybe if there was a stronger visual language in schools, it would be easier for these people you work with to express what they want you to draw. I mean, fortunately, you're able to extrapolate from whatever they tell you a good sketch.
Right. Well, I think part of it is, my wife is an engineer,
Mm-hmm.
so I got to see firsthand how all consuming the technical side of it is in the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
So, it takes a lot of their time doing that. But I think in certainly some of these sciences, at least not necessarily in her case, but some of the natural sciences, like you were speaking about, where there's observational issues at hand. Yeah, I think there's more of you get an actual physical connection if you're out there and observing animals or drawing flowers, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one thing to snap a picture, but then you don't really, unless you go back and look at it and study it, and even then, you're linked to that one, frame of how you're looking at it versus being able to turn it over in your hands. How are those petals attached on the back, and
Exactly.
all those, the little tiny hairs that you see on the stems and all those fine details that you're just not going to be able to go back and appreciate later just
Hmm.
from a single view, or even potential like a multiple views in a picture just aren't going to tell the tale that
Hmm.
you're speaking of, that immediate connection that you're saying. It's
And
pretty.
even there's a grand tradition of in the 1800s when people were using, and earlier, obviously, of people making observations in the sky, looking at stars and planets and sketching. I actually found for my art book some sketches that are public domain that Christian Huygens did of Jupiter and
Oh yeah,
Saturn and stuff. And it's really interesting how that's how you recorded these observations. There was no way to photograph them or instruments even other than your eye and the telescope.
sure.
And, so you had to be observant. And it seems like, I don't know, there's probably a lot of distractions these days too, to being super observant. I mean,
Yeah,
that's one thing that I love about urban sketching is that you find yourself noticing things that you never notice on a normal daily basis.
true. And of
Because,
course, some of the interesting things, of course, you get people, like Percival Lowell, who
mhm.
of course, in his observations, had for many, many years, even until like the 1950s, that there were canals on Mars and things.
I know. It's that
So
a little
there's
wishful thinking
times it
there.
works, and other times, there's a certain amount of, say, prejudice, that comes with like, well, what are you seeing, and what do you want to see? You know,
Exactly.
yeah. So, but no, I think that you're right. That was a great way looking at those old pictures and things. But yeah, what people put down, it's an excellent point.
Well, someone's sketchbook probably, in a lot of ways, does reflect their attitudes and their how they look at things. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
I
one
mean,
of
I
the
don't think
things
you
that's
can
so
really
neat about
avoid
it.
it, nor would you necessarily. I mean, I suppose as a scientist, you would want to try and be, very pragmatic and very, kind of cold and intellectual about it. But, yeah, there's nothing wrong with bringing your own thoughts to it and how you see it. So
Hmm.
there you go.
So let's back up a little bit and talk a little bit because you've had a really interesting illustration and design career. So could you tell us a little bit? I know you went to CCAD and then shortly after was your first illustration work. Was it Ohio Magazine that you had said that you had worked for?
Yeah, well, yeah, just backing up a little bit further, my brother's an illustrator also.
Hmm.
And he went to CCAD first, and much to my parents' chagrin, one day I said, "Hey, I'm going there too."
Oh,
you
what's
know,
the age difference between you and Ron?
4.5 years.
Oh, okay, okay.
So he graduated from school just as I was entering it. Which
Hmm.
I'm sure they all said, "Oh, good, another Miller." But yeah, so I majored in illustration with a minor in advertising design. First worked at an insurance company when I got out, but then went to work for Ohio Magazine shortly after that as an assistant art director. Did get to do editorial illustrations. We assigned those things, and frequently the other assistant art director and I were both did illustration work, so we'd kind of like, hey, that'd be good for us to do and save them some money. The sort of the interesting thing too, a side note, is that the owner of our magazine was Larry Flint, which made for very interesting times since we shared office space with Hustler.
Whoa.
Yeah, what a time!
What,
Um,
what year was this about? Was this the 80s or?
no, this was actually would have been like 77 to 1980.
Okay, yeah, the 70s were a weird time.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I was very young, but I mean the movies and the media from then, obviously that's when Star Wars started, but there was kind of a mixture of pessimism and optimism and grittiness that I think hasn't been seen since.
yeah, well, and plain old wackiness too. When you have movies like Xanadu and Roller Boogie and discos, of course,
Zardoz.
and Zardoz, yes, which is very interesting. Someone posted a picture of Sean Connery in his outfit. It's the and because the movie Zardoz takes place in 2023,
Uh,
so we can all start wearing scarves wrapped around our bodies and carrying Webley pistols apparently. So it's going to happen this year.
Maybe in another, well, yeah, the year's not over. It's only January.
There
So,
you
I mean,
go. Who wants
perhaps,
to just wear a scarf wrapped around you in January? So
yeah.
come warmer weather, game on.
Yeah, maybe that'll be the next thing. If I were an enterprising fashion designer, I think I would be starting my line.
There you go. Yeah, and after that, I went freelance for a short time and worked for a studio in Columbus that was doing a lot of T-shirt design for a company out in Bear, Delaware. And in fact, the other assistant art director and I both got hired by them and moved out to Delaware. Did a lot of typography design by hand, which was really fun and sort of a bit of a lost art.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we did was on frosted acetate with rapidographs and just insane, especially when we had to do outline of curve type and things. But at that time, we also had the rights to doing all the T-shirt and poster work for Star Wars,
Ah,
and
awesome.
Superman, and Flash Gordon. So we got to work on a lot of fun things. In fact, in the movie Poltergeist, the original one by Steven Spielberg, well, not Steven Spielberg, kind of produced it.
Was
But
that Hooper, Fred Hooper, that
Yeah, it
directed
was Hooper that
Poltergeist?
supposedly directed it, but apparently there were a lot of issues why it looks very Spielbergian.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah,
Really interesting.
yeah.
But
But
we
at one
digress.
but at one point, one of the kids is getting sucked into the closet, and there's all this Star Wars paraphernalia. And right next to the closet, there's a poster of Darth Vader, and I did that poster.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was their photograph, but I airbrushed in, all the smoke around it and his lightsaber and everything. And I just noticed that for the first time this last year. After
Oh,
all
how
these years,
exciting.
didn't even realize that my poster was on the wall.
Whoa,
Uh,
that's a really interesting piece of pop culture.
yeah, it's kind of fun. But then, yeah, and during that time was doing a lot of work for planetariums. My brother and I worked on some projects together, doing some books for him. We kept went back to freelancing. Um, Gosh, there's just a lot of different stuff. Moved back to Ohio, and I worked on video games for a short time when it was still on the Apple, just and Apple. It had 64K of memory on it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and did a video game for Reader's Digest software, and won an award for this thing. And um, so that was my first foray into computer art. Um, Working mostly freelance during that time. Moved then to Cincinnati when Barb got her engineering degree, and that's when I went to work for Ralph Partha for 3 years as their creative director. So designing box covers, typography design for that.
Mm-hmm.
Then, gosh, freelance again. Then went to work for Optimum Group, where I was doing an ad agency for 3 years. Left there, went to work for the video game industry, working with Sony and Sierra Games for like 3 years. Left there, Barb got transferred to California. I went and worked on for Maxis. I worked on The Sims Bustin' Out
Nice.
for a year, and back to freelancing, doing an entire 2 year project of a mini CD in 23 languages in Flash
Whoa.
for the World Nuclear Association in London, because I designed a poster for the UN, and the guy who was there left to be the director of the World Nuclear Association, and kind of pulled me along to that. Came back to Cincinnati, and at that point, then, I worked at a MMG in Loveland as a creative director again, doing medical videos for Ethicon. So a lot of surgical videos and things, and showing computer animations of transvaginal hysterectomies.
Oh dear.
Oh yeah, when they show you pictures like in the anatomy books, and everything's like these beautiful blue organs and purple organs.
Yeah, they don't
And you
really
watch
look
the
like
video and it's red, everything,
that.
unless you get adipose tissue, which is the fat, and then it's yellow. So
Ugh,
pretty much working with a very limited palette inside human bodies of yellow and red.
ugh.
Yeah. But then after that, just went back to freelancing, and that's when I got involved heavily then with Procter and Gamble and Upstream Media, Upstream 360, and haven't kind of looked back from doing that as the majority of my work of concept work. Worked with them for a while. I was their technology visualization director because nobody seemed to really understand the difference between molecules and atoms. So I was there to explain to people how science worked. You know,
That sounds like a very tall order to do.
it has been, yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. So a pretty varied career,
Hmm.
to the point where one time I showed my portfolio to someone. And they said, "This is really great stuff, but what do you do?"
That's interesting that
Well,
they couldn't tell. You do a
yeah.
lot
I
of
said,
things.
"Well, this." They said, "Well, we know you can do all this, but what do you do?" So, so sometimes people I think have found it confusing that I've had the opportunity, which I'm really pleased with, to have gotten to dabble in so many different disciplines.
Well, that's the great thing about being an illustrator is you get to work on so many things that you're not an expert at.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, there's so many books I've worked on that I had no idea about the topic, and you sure learn fast when you have to draw 40 pictures of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the stuff that you do, I mean that you all the different animals and anatomy and
Oh, yes.
that, I mean it's a constant, there is no learning curve. It's just, 45 degrees on up.
Yes, yes. I was doing an illustration once and I had to depict something from the 1800s and I was trying to, illustrate an experiment and the pictures that I had because it was for a biography, it had to be fairly accurate. So somebody connected me with a professor at this university and he started getting frustrated because of the questions I was asking. And I said, imagine your slowest student and explain this to me how I'm supposed to draw it. Because the stuff that we're interested in is not necessarily what a scientist is interested in.
Right,
Like they
exactly.
don't care what color something is or, what something necessarily even looks like except for the experiment.
Right.
And so it was kind of funny, getting this information from people because people don't necessarily, they may know what somebody famous has done, but who knows about what their hair color is or their eye color
Sure.
or what their house looked like or what
Right. Their
a lot of
preference
these
in dress
details
or whatever. Sure.
that you have to illustrate. And it's interesting because they say whenever you go to a lot of these houses that have famous, like Edgar Allan Poe lived here, or what famous author lived here. A lot of times, these houses do not have any of the stuff that was in them when that person lived there.
Right.
So it's almost like our illustrations. It's a recreation based on what it may have been like, but probably wasn't.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's really nobody to come and tell you that you're wrong. So
Well,
you
that's
just give
one of
it give it as much visual veracity as you possibly can.
Well,
So
that's one of the things that's fun about drawing dinosaurs is that you're really unlikely to get wrong because a lot of times the dinosaur you're drawing, there was so little of it seen, and the whole
right.
thing might be extrapolated from a elbow or a
Yeah,
hand or a tail or something, and they're just assuming what the rest of it looks like.
exactly. And of
And
course, I mean, as a kid, I loved dinosaurs and had,
mhm,
the two things I'd been interested as a kid was either volcanology or paleontology.
mhm,
And when I was a kid, there were like 10 dinosaurs. And I'm not even exaggerating. I mean, there was just that was kind of it. And now there's just
mhm.
hundreds and hundreds of them. And of course, were they warm blooded? Were they feathered? I think we're seeing a little bit of it kind of going from one extreme where it was nothing. They were tail dragging, sluggish creatures. And now they're these, feathered quetzalcoatl like
Exactly.
creatures running around, um, and but I think they're probably somewhere more
Mhm.
in between than the more fanciful feathered T Rexes and things that we're seeing. But yeah, just the variety these days and stuff. Yeah, what
Mhm.
great fun, good
But
time.
this is probably another thing where we were discussing visualization and biases. Most dinosaur visualizations are based on those first illustrations that were done
Yeah, yep.
and are
Cool.
variations on that. So it's really hard to change what people have done. I mean, we don't even know if how we illustrate any of these, if this is how they look.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, because really they only have a few. They've got all the bones and things. Although it's surprising, like even in Jurassic Park, where they showed them literally just kind of brushing away to get to the bones and things, and a lot of misinformation. Say, popular misinformation of how they really unearth these things and how much they get from a single dig. It may just be a bone or two.
Hmm.
The whole idea of digging up a T-Rex is just, it generally, for all intents and purposes, just doesn't happen.
Hmm.
It's a lot of extrapolation, like you're saying, and stuff,
Yeah,
which is why they turn to people like you and me.
there was an old Terry Gilliam cartoon I always loved where it showed the foot in the Monty Python credits where it breaks into pieces and it's found thousands of years later and all they find is the big toe. And he makes a recreation and it's like this elephant style creature with the nose. And they said, we've recreated this animal how we think it really looked.
I like that. Yeah, very good point.
But it's actually not that different from how it really happens.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course, the whole thing about the Brontosaurus and the Apatosaurus, that ended up
Yes.
supposedly being renamed, and thank goodness they've come to their senses, and we have a Brontosaurus again. So, I mean, how can you not have a thunder lizard? Is what
Of
Brontosaurus
course. Of
means.
course.
It's like, good lord, And of course, they got rid of Pluto too, but that's another issue. So.
Which you've done a lot of illustration for Scientific American. Do you usually do work with your brother on those, or how does that
No, I
that
actually, I mean, I've done some. I mean, not of course as much as he has and things, but we have collaborated on pieces, more astronomical type pieces. His forte is more planetary art. He was the art director at the Einstein Spacarium at the National Air and Space Museum at the Smithsonian for many years, and that's really what he is known for, is that kind of work. However, when it comes to doing hardware, spaceships, landers and things, he'll frequently call on me to, open up 3D and make spaceships for him, or
nice?
or draw creatures. He doesn't feel real comfortable drawing aliens and monsters and things, so I get to do the monsters and the spaceships, and he does these wonderful alien landscapes.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, but it's definitely fun to work together.
And do you do the sketch prompts together sometimes too?
Yes. Oh, yeah. He does. Yeah, that's the one this morning. Uh, I was just telling you earlier. It's so funny because we will very frequently, since they're so open ended, what they could possibly be, how frequently he and I will come up with the same solution. Um, yeah, it's kind of spooky. But I guess after growing up together, and our dad was an ardent science fiction fan, and we used to go to the Esquire Theater regularly to see, Earth versus Flying Saucers, Forbidden Planet, Journey to the Center of the Earth. These were all things my dad was absolutely loved, and it was only about a 3 block walk to the movies. So we're kind of inculcated in a lot of the same, atmosphere and likes and things. But I guess it has translated as well to, just how we will sort of look for solutions, graphic solutions and things as well. So.
Hmm. That's interesting. I wonder how often that happens where you have people that grew up together that are both artists and how often that they think about solutions to a problem similarly. It is an interesting argument for brain chemistry.
Yeah, you have to call the Hildebrands, or at least
Oh,
great.
yes, that's true. That's true. I wonder, that would be a good question to ask them.
Yeah, well, him. Tim's
Him,
gone.
yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I apologize. But I'm sure he would remember,
Yeah.
they probably did,
Or get a Ouija board.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, that'll be for the other podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll
Exactly.
do a co-podcast for that one.
Exactly.
So all of the sketching that you've been doing has led up to you planning to do a book. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. These, like I said, all these drawings, they all of them have a title to them. So when
Hmm.
I always write the prompt at the bottom, and I found that people tend to read the prompt and then use that when they look at it to sort of go, oh, this is why it was done. And generally, they try to be rather sort of lighthearted and whimsical responses to it. Um, I did one of the unexpected guest one day, but it was like a person looking out their little peephole out of their door, and it was death at their door. So sometimes it's a little commentary on one's mortality, but most of them are not like that. They're like I said, they're um, sort of visual puns sometimes, and I've gotten pretty good response with people looking at these, because I will bring them to our illustrators lunch, and they seem to people react well. So I thought about putting them into a sketchbook or a book form that would include the final drawings. But frequently with a lot of these, I will do a concept sketch for myself at first. So I figured that I would do the finished drawing on the one page, and on the other page facing it would be just a little blurb about what my thought process was, and include, if there are the sketch level, the sketch on the other page, so they can just sort of see the thought process, as well as the physical process of how I approached it in the drawing. Well, we'll see. I find interesting. Other artists seemed to have found it interesting. We'll see if anybody else finds it interesting.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, the sketches you do are really entertaining. I mean, I think anyone who has a sketch practice or just appreciates good drawing would really love it. I mean, they're so clever, some of the ideas, and we'll include some in the notes in the Patreon so people can see a couple of Tom's sketches, but they're really fun.
Yeah,
And so
I try
hopefully,
to, because I don't want to do this, I don't look at this every morning as an onerous thing to have to face,
oh, of course not. It keeps you interested in drawing. That's why everybody sketches, I think, in
exactly,
a sketchbook.
yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, what was the next, another question?
Oh no, we were talking
I think I milked that one for.
Well, do you have a timeline? I know it's very difficult, just having had done the gallery in the book that I have.
Sure.
And even though that's a very small portion of the book, it was very difficult to edit that because you can't put everything in. And so you have to cut it down to what and that's really hard to do. So how do you anticipate trimming down 600 pages to, I don't know, how long are you planning the book to be?
I was
Or is
thinking
this going to be,
I was thinking maybe at most 100 drawings. I think that would
okay.
be more than enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone through. I have a separate binder of ones that I like to show to people, and then there's some that are like, yeah, I'm not sure I was, maybe in the right right mental place that day or something, but it wouldn't be too hard to winnow down to 100 of them. Um, but yeah, I was sort of like been kind of bouncing back and forth between doing this, and my other project is doing a board game as well, and that would be illustrated. So there's an illustration aspect to it as well. Plus, I've talked to some other illustrators about working on it with me to provide some of the artwork. One of them being Mark Nelson, who is very interested in doing some of the work for it. So yeah, I kind of keep bouncing back and forth between them. I'll say one moment going, oh, well, yeah, people would really like the game. And the next is like, gosh, I'd really like to do this sketchbook. So, and then I get calls from PNG, and like this morning from Upstream. And suddenly I'm drawing Cascade instead, of doing what I really would like to be doing.
Well,
That pays the bills.
I mean, I can't wait till you kickstart this book, because I think it would be really awesome. And so hopefully, it's in your plans. I don't know, for 2023 maybe, or
I would hope so, and it's been inspirational seeing you do yours. I mean, seriously, that's been a good point for me to see you going through the process. A little scary, because I know it's been difficult for you. I mean, there's been a lot of ups and downs of figuring out designers and all the rest of it and stuff, but still, all in all, it's not a case of gee, if Christina can do it, then I can.
this is
But
probably the biggest project I've ever done.
yeah, well, I mean, you've done all these things for other people. It's fun to see you doing something just for you,
Uh-huh.
But no, but it really has been a good thing to see you doing that in terms
Mm-hmm.
of seeing, wow, I guess this can be done. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just a question of getting it in your busy schedule. I mean, all
yeah,
of us have such busy schedules with other projects and books and that sort of thing. And eventually the goal is to do mostly just my own IP, which, that's your probably goal as well.
It is. I really do enjoy, doing the Procter and Gamble work and all, but I wouldn't mind, my doing, going at my wife and I, our age, doctors keep going, oh, so when are you going to retire? And my wife is an engineer, of course. Well, she'll probably retire and then end up doing consulting. But he asked me this, and I'm going like, my brother is 75 now, and just did a cover for Natural History and another one for Sky and Telescope, and just wrote two more books. I
That
said,
doesn't sound retired at all.
yeah, it's like I said, oh gee, I'll do like Winston Churchill. I'll retire and I'll paint. It's like, yeah. I know one of our favorite artists, Chesley Bonestell, who was like the father of
Yes,
modern
yes.
space art. He passed away at 99, and he had just finished his last painting the day before he passed away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just don't see any retiring here. I just see moving towards doing work I prefer to be doing, but still, art will always be the prime mover and motivation for me in terms of
Mm-hmm.
staying active and mentally, physically, and just having some fun.
Exactly, exactly. And this is, one thing about publishing right now is there's never been a time when it's been, in a way, easier for you to do your own properties
Sure.
because you don't need to necessarily submit them to someone anymore. You can just say, this is my idea and I'm going to pursue it.
Right. You can go directly rather than having to wait for them to find, a market. And of course, with publishers, they're very, and appropriately so, profit oriented because they have a business to run, and so they are much more risk averse in
Mm-hmm.
wanting to do something unusual or whatever. And now, if you're willing to, put in, a lot of it is sweat equity. The costs are there, but I would say the sweat equity is almost the highest of the two, and
Mm-hmm.
also perhaps putting aside other money making things. So there is a actual monetary risk there for us as well, but nowhere near what would happen if you had Simon and Schuster or Doubleday or Penguin,
Mm-hmm.
is for you. But so it really is a good time for that
Mm-hmm.
sort of
And a lot of these big publishers are really struggling right now because things are changing so much. The way
thing.
people digest media is changing. The way people buy things is changing.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
the way, that's a whole other discussion that's not, has nothing to do with sketching, but, all of these business models are changing. And I don't know, there is no such thing as where they're going to end up. It's just as technology changes and as people change the way they buy things, all of these industries are going to change.
Sure.
But I think as an independent creator, it's actually pretty exciting.
Yeah. I would say one other thing, going back to sketching a bit, because I've had run into this a lot with the work I'm doing, is a lot of the, this is the old fogey, segment of the show here. Let me go out and yell at somebody to get off my lawn for a moment, and I'll be
Just
right
shake
back.
your fist at a cloud and I
Yeah, there
get
you
you.
go. Exactly. Uh, yeah, I like that. um, but a lot of the other illustrators I've been working with at some of these, places, little agencies and things, are doing strictly digital work on pads, and they're doing great work. However, the thing that I would just say to encourage people is to physically draw, in the sense of on paper, on a sketchbook, on napkins, whatever, but pick up a pencil, because during these sessions that I go to, they will sometimes bring out these pieces of paper where they will write down their ideas, and there's a big blank square there, and they want you to fill that square. And if you bring your iPad with you, or whatever one you're working on, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm,
have run across some of these very talented people who literally freeze when it comes to drawing on the paper because they can't, control Z their way back out of something, you know.
That needs to be a t-shirt slogan. You can't control Z your way out of this.
Yeah, there you go. It's like, and plus they need to see it. They don't have time to draw it, send it to a printer, if there's a printer at the location. I was at the Mason Business Center from Procter and Gamble the other day drawing, and this place is huge. I mean, it's just unbelievably big. And who knows where a printer might be? They might have one there, but another one, they might have a print center somewhere. And these people want a drawing done to stick up on the wall because then they go around with these dots and put dots on their favorite concepts. And just they don't have time for that process. And if you do it, you'd have to take your pad maybe, and they can pass it around to people. In the meantime, then you can't be working, because your pad is busy. So I would highly encourage anyone who wants to be doing this, say professionally. If you're doing it on your own, more power to you. Do it in whatever medium or mode you want. But if you're interested in a professional career, I cannot emphasize enough the value of traditional media to make yourself marketable and viable out there. So,
well, I think it's important to draw and sketch anyway. I mean, you and I both work both digitally and traditionally. Right. Although this latest book I'm illustrating, I'm doing in gouache because my husband got me a gouache kit, and I've had so much fun that awesome. I'm painting it in gouache. So, there's some. I love painting digitally, and I love my Cintiq. The thing that's difficult is that there's something about happy accidents that happen with paint that still can't happen the same way digitally. I'm not sure why that is. I haven't been able to figure out why it is.
Well, somebody will probably come up with it with a program that's, happy accident 2.0. Well, it's a filter you run and it just messes things up and you hope for the best.
It may be one of those things where, and maybe it is something that will be figured out eventually, something about the chemistry of the paint. And that's, I don't want to say the randomness of it is hard to duplicate in a digital form. I mean, It's come a long way, and you can get, I've done a lot of books digitally and thought the artwork turned out well, but there's something about the painterliness. You can even get a painterliness in digital, but it's still like it takes longer to imitate what paint does than it does to paint.
Sure.
And it's hard to describe because you can simulate it, but it takes a lot more work to simulate it than just take a brush and scan it in.
I think a major part of it is, experiential for the artists themselves, because I know when I'm painting, whether I'm doing it on cold press board or, like on a canvas or something, there's a certain amount of biofeedback that you get. Even if you set painter to be, using thick oils with a stiff brush on an unprimed canvas, it feels exactly the same as if you set it to be drawing on cold press with an ink pen. Yes. And you don't get the scritchiness of the pen. You don't get that drag on the brush that lets you know when to maybe just turn the brush a certain way, kind of a thing that you just can't, duplicate digitally. And
not yet anyway.
Not yet anyway. I'm sure at some point someone will figure out a way to kind of, give some sort of physical feedback, through the stylus or whatever. Well, on one other thing is actually I've been kind of trying to get involved in doing more watercolor work because partially inspired by you and the work that you do, and Larry McDougall, Emily Hare, Omar Ryan, several of these people, seeing what they do. And also I feel it kind of ties a little more into sketching. Because frequently you see with a lot of these people's work, you can see the pencil work there. Because when I do painting, generally I paint in acrylics, occasionally in oil, and it's all totally covered for all intents and purposes. So I figure it's kind of a good step to go from sketching to doing watercolor work. And I'm having a great deal of fun with it. And thank you for the suggestions that you've made about the different brands and the like. They have all been well received. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So you've tried the core watercolor?
Yeah.
I love the color on it.
Yeah, no, they're really, really vivid. Very interesting that I did get, I was reading the instructions by William Stout about doing the sort of Arthur Rackham technique, and it really does work what he has put down. But one of the things he is absolutely adamant about is whatever you do, do not use Dr. Martin's dyes.
Oh, do they even still make those?
Yeah, I have a set
Because
of
I
them
know
here.
Luma dyes are no longer made, and Luma
Yeah,
dyes were not very scannable. They were very fluorescent. And
well, and the problem with Dr. Martin's dyes is they're very volatile and very easily can lose their color type of
hmm
thing. I
Luma
did a
dyes were
lot
the
of stuff in
same. Yeah.
yeah, art school with them and stuff, where you put the color down and spritz it with bleach and you get these really neat color shifts and things and stuff. But yeah, he was adamant saying, if you're going to be doing this, use good watercolor or inks, but not Dr. Martin's dyes.
They're not they're not archival,
They're
I
not
guess.
color fast or archival, correct?
They were it's interesting because a lot of illustration was basically meant to be disposable. And
Right.
so the materials were not, people didn't care if they were archival. I mean, you hear
Yeah.
stories about Marvel Studios just throwing away old artwork by famous artists like Jack
Yeah.
Kirby. And,
Yikes.
I know, but it's true, right? They threw a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff away. But on that note,
Yeah.
let's wrap it up here. And where can
Okay.
people find you on your socials?
I am on Instagram, except I don't remember what it is. I think it's Tomokato69, Tomokato 69. And
Mm-hmm.
then my website is atomicart, one word.com. And going to be updating some of that sooner rather than later, but those are the two main places.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for talking about sketching and illustration with me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.